Well, good evening. It's time for us to jump back into our journey through the Old Testament. And as we do so, what we're doing right now is just a reminder, doing an overview of the wisdom literature, what we often call the books of poetry, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then Song of Solomon. Again, and just a reminder, for tonight, we're not doing deep dives into these. We're not doing, a full chapter by chapter, verse by verse type of thing. But we're trying to give at least an introduction so we have a good idea of what it is that we are dealing with. Usually do the introduction in a week or two. I would imagine we'll probably spend a couple weeks looking at Ecclesiastes and focusing on what we have here. But doing that this evening, we are actually going to take at least a couple sections and break down those sections and take a look at those. So, as we get into Ecclesiastes, I think it's important to, first of all, understand the interpretive guide that is given to us. Because if I were just to say, okay, someone tell me, what is Ecclesiastes about? If you had to put Ecclesiastes in a sentence or something, what would you say? Okay, hold on 1 second. There we go. Sharam's pulling double duty back. So, all right, Ryan, what would you say?
Life under the sun.
Okay, life under the sun. All right, Talia.
Exploring God's mysterious gift of life.
Wow, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what you said.
Exploring God's mysterious gift of life.
All right, exploring God's mysterious. It's coming out of this speaker and it's not directed towards me, so I can't hear it. What was it? Exploring God's mysterious
gift of life.
Gift of life. All right, very good, Talia. All right. Yeah, Joshua. Go ahead, just say it. Okay, people working the ground. I think he's using the view from the overhead for that. All right, but there's something to that as far as hard work and hard labor being a key component of looking at Ecclesiastes. All right, very good. So some good answers here. Anybody else? Well, there has been, at least I think, a lot of focus on Ecclesiastes to go really to what Joshua just said, and to see Ecclesiastes almost as a highly negative, pessimistic type of outlook on life. Why would people believe that? Yeah, Isaac? All right, Isaac says because it starts off with the words meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. Or is the common phrase, the one that I think rolls off your tongue just a little bit better, vanity, vanity, all is vanity, right? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And yeah, that's how it begins. And some have said that this is really just a writing that creates really dark view of what life is. And by the way, when you read through Ecclesiastes, do you get a lot of that? Yeah, we're going to cover some of that today and look at some of that in the very beginning of Ecclesiastes. But is that really the exegetical framework to understand this writing? And I would suggest that what we're supposed to do to understand this writing is to focus on really the beginning and the end, and then a little other section that I'm going to throw in there as well. But as we look at the beginning and the end, I think that will help at least to frame some idea what's taking place. Because there is a very clear, in Ecclesiastes, there's a clear beginning and there's a clear ending that seem to be kind of like a prologue, epilogue type of a situation. There's a narrator to some degree who is expressing these thoughts. as you flip through Ecclesiastes, if you have your Bible, what's the one thing that might stick out at you if you've been reading through Job, through the Psalms, through the Proverbs, and then you get to Ecclesiastes? Just visually, as you look at it, what sticks out? Well, wisdom, but I'm just saying, just looking at it, not even reading it, just looking at it.
Much of it.
All right. So remember, we know poetry, at least from what the editors of the Old Testament give us, what they call poetry is written in a certain format, right? What about Job? What kind of format is it written in?
Dialogue.
Well, prose or poetry? It's poetry, by and large. First couple chapters are written in kind of a prose. You have prose at the very end, but the main bulk of it is poetic writing. And we talked about the importance of poetic writing. What about the Psalms? Prose or poetry? Poetry. What about the Proverbs? By and large, poetry. And then you go to Ecclesiastes and you start flipping through here. Prose or poetry? It's predominantly prose. There's a few sections that are written in poetic form, but the vast majority of Ecclesiastes is written in prose. In fact, it's the beginning section that is written in poetic form. And then you have just a couple more sections, really, as you flip through in chapter 3, chapter 7, and then 10, 11, major ones, and then little one or two liners throughout there. So that's interesting because we talked about the importance of understanding poetic language when it comes to wisdom. And when it comes to them talking about wisdom, dispensing of wisdom, and oftentimes that's going to be done using poetic language. Ecclesiastes it flips the script there just a little bit, because the majority of Ecclesiastes is not using poetry. It's not talking in parallels, poetic structure. It is predominantly prose. And I think there's a reason for that we'll kind of hopefully get into. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Just start off verses 1 through 11, the introduction to Ecclesiastes. Let's begin. Ecclesiastes 1:1. The words of the preacher, teacher, something like that, Koheleth. If you ever hear the term Koheleth, this is what that's referring to. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So immediately we are instructed to understand this as coming from whom? All right, from Solomon, the son of David, the wise one who sat in Jerusalem. We are being invited from the very beginning, even though there's a lot of debate. Did Solomon write this? Everything else. He doesn't explicitly call himself, whatever the case. The narrator, the one who's introducing, is inviting us to see this as Solomon's writing. And I think it's important to allow for him to dictate how we view this. So we're going to go with the assumption, with the understanding, that this comes from Solomon. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been done is what will be done. And what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things, yet to be among those who come after. Let's talk about these words. Now, can you imagine why people assume Ecclesiastes is kind of a dark book, writing? As Isaac said, it begins with, was the word meaningless? Meaningless, meaningless. I think empty. I like the word empty better. I'm not saying meaningless is bad or vanity is bad. For me, empty. There's just nothing there. There's nothing to it. Empty, empty. Everything's empty. Meaningless. There is no meaning. And then verse 3, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? This becomes one of the important phrases, and I probably have this later on as an important phrase. We'll just talk about it now. In fact, we've seen two incredibly important phrases, but Ryan, you said this earlier, under the sun, when you think of Ecclesiastes. So let me ask this question. What does that mean? Under the sun. Okay, you're working under the sun. Yeah, Ryan?
Well, the sun rises and the sun sets, and it just keeps going. It's a cycle, and it just keeps going.
All right.
And it's vanity because it's almost like in the larger scope of things, there's no progress being made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the sun is talked about even in this passage, right? As taking its circuit across the sky, and then it sets, and what does it do? It races its way back around to its starting point again, so that it can do the same thing over again. And so the sun creates this kind of dome of some sorts. There's this picture of life that takes place under the sun, and he says that life is vanity, empty, meaningless. Is that true?
Without God, it is.
Okay. All right. But consider his basis for this statement, right? Kevin over here. And the way that he describes this. By the way, we're only in verses 1 through 11. Okay? That's all we're discussing at the moment, right? So, the way that he describes this, is it true? Yeah, Kevin?
Well, I think the majority of the things that are mentioned here are things that really man can't control.
Okay.
The sun comes up, sun goes down, the wind goes where it goes, the rain goes where it is, rivers aren't filled up. From the evidence of things that happen in creation, man's not in part of this whole equation, really. It happens the way it happens. Outside of maybe saying that there's nothing new under the sun, might have some other discussion there, but primarily Earth and the environment that we live in, it happens the way it happens, and man really doesn't have a part of that. I mean, man doesn't have any control over that aspect of it. So there's, it's just the way it is. What are you going to do? You can't stop it. You can't control it.
All right, can't stop it, can't control it. Very good. Yeah, let's write these things down. What are these things that Kevin says that just happen that man has no control over. They just happen. What is it that comes and goes and comes again? An idea? What does he put up here? Okay. All right, so generations come and go, while what else? What's immediately compared to it? The earth, right? What does he say about the earth?
Remains forever.
All right, so generations come and go, but the earth remains forever. And I think the basis of that remains forever, generally speaking, unchanged. Is the idea. A generation comes, a generation goes, you see those, it just happens. But that doesn't affect, and kind of to Kevin's point, doesn't affect the earth remaining forever. Why? What are the cycles? No, I just used the word I was going to pull out of you guys later. So, just remember that word. What are the things that he says about the earth? All right. Have the sun, right? What else?
Wind.
The next one is what? Wind, okay.
Rivers.
Okay, river. Well, rivers and what? The sea. Right. Let's see here. Yeah. All right, so we have these different examples of it. What does he say that the sun does? The sun goes up, it goes down, and then what? Goes back to its place and repeats. And it continues to do its thing forever, unchanged. What about the wind? What does he say? What does the wind do? Yeah. Yeah, so Jesus is the one that talks about the wind doing what it wants to. This one, I think there's a purpose to what he says, is that the wind goes south, and then the wind goes north, right? What about the waters? What do the waters do? Yeah, the waters go down the rivers, and you would think at some point that sea's going to fill up, wouldn't you? Is that what happens? No. Somehow, and I'm not saying that they had, a view of the rain cycle or something or whatever. That's not the point. This isn't scientific foreknowledge of some sort. Or all he's saying is that the rivers flow to the sea, but the sea doesn't fill up because what are those waters doing? Well, he wouldn't say they're evaporating. He just says that they're what? They're going back where they came from. So in all of these pictures, there's a what that's taking place? All right, a cycle. Yes, that's a great word. Whoever threw that one out, that was brilliant, right? And all of these, there is a cyclical nature to all of these things. And if you have a cycle, what does the cycle do? Over and over and over again. And it's a force of repetition that's going to continue on until when? Not according to the author of Ecclesiastes, for him, he has Jesus or the return of Jesus. For him, the earth remains forever. And as long as the earth is here, these cycles are going to come and they're going to go. And they're going to keep going again and again and again. All things are full of weariness, a man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be. What has been done is what will be done. And there's nothing new under the sun. Aside from the fact that this kind of has like Tolkien type feel to it, or Robert Jordan, for those of you familiar with that thing, the whole Wheel of Time type of an aspect here. What's that language really saying? That life is what?
Futile.
I'm not hearing well tonight. I'm sorry.
It's futile.
Futile? I don't know if we're getting to futile yet. He's getting there. He's absolutely, definitely getting there. But with this picture right here, what's he saying that life is like? What is he saying that life is like? Repetitive. It's a cycle. I mean, that's all that he's saying. What has been is what will be done, right? And when it's done then, it has been for them, and it will be done again. There's a cycle to it. That's the way that all of this is being viewed. So that there is nothing new under the sun. Now, what might we say in response to this?
It's mostly right.
What about man flying? Is that new? Okay. Yeah, over here, Kevin. What about the internet? Is that new? Computer electronics, things like that? Yeah, Kevin?
Well, I think the emphasis here is not on those other things that were mentioned, but the actions of the topics that have hand are going to stay the same. So the sun coming up and going down, the wind doing what it's doing, the rain's doing what it is, those things aren't going to change. We're not going to see some dramatic new thing that's going to happen in what has been put in place. So that, I think, is the emphasis of that statement towards the under the sun.
Absolutely. And to say that he has in mind technology, did they have technological advances in their day?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They were always devising new metals and things like that, new ways of making weapons and various things, new ways of making work easier. This is not a statement that has to do with things, that has to do with technology. That's outside of the scope of what he's talking about. Very specifically, he's talking about human behavior. We don't behave differently than people behaved in the past. What has been done is what's being done is what will be done. Because we live according to these cycles, and as Kevin says, all this, his entire argument, is predicated on these things. These are the things. They don't change. They won't change. This is the way that life is. What has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it said, see, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. The problem is there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Let me ask this question. How many of y'all knew your parents? Okay. How many of y'all knew your grandparents? All right. Now, My question is not how many know of them, how many know their names. I'm talking about you had a relationship where you spoke with them, talked with them, that you had a back and forth relationship. How many of you knew your grandparents? Okay. How many of you knew your great-grandparents? Not as many hands. Still quite a good number. How many of you knew your great-great-grandparents? What about your great-great-great-grandparents? Your great-great-great-great. I'm having to do numbers here because that's a lot of greats. Grandparents. There are people from generations past that are a part of your history, your line going back. They are a part of creating and making you. You're in their line. But we don't know them. Now, some people are really into history. Dave could probably tell us a few things about generations past here that some of the younger folks, to them, that would be like going back to great-grandparents' times. I know he's been doing a lot. Some people are just fascinated with finding your lineage, Ancestry.com, those types of things, and you might be able to pinpoint some names, and you might be able to find a newspaper article or something about this person or that person. Maybe they signed an official document back in the 1800s or 1700s or something like that. You know, you might be able to find tidbits of information, but do you really know that person? How many of you have kids? How many of you have grandkids? How many of you have great-grandkids? All right. All right. How many of you have great-great-grandkids? How many of you have great-great-great-grandkids? See, hey guys, let's pay attention, please. Thank you. Here's the picture. At one point in time, right now, you are living. You have an impact in this world. You matter in a way with all of the people around you. You are being influenced by people before, you are influencing people after. And you have a moment on this ball, but that moment's going to come to its end. And we're going to leave a legacy for that next generation that we're going to influence. And they'll talk about us when they get together at family reunions or 2 generations down the road. They'll talk about us to their kids, and they'll say, boy, I really wish you'd known my grandpa or my grandma because you would have really liked them. You were just like them. It's funny how much you're just like your great-grandparents. But then time come a generation of people who will not remember you. I will be forgotten. You will be forgotten. And we're going to be names that somebody down the road is going to find using Ancestry.com or whatever its equivalent is in those days. And if we signed a document somewhere or did something in some way that got recorded in a newspaper, my great-great-great-grandkids might see that, I played in a basketball game when I was in 5th grade and it got posted in the newspaper, that type of a thing. Yeah. That's all that's going to be left of us. Because generations come and generations go. And as we focus on this moment, right here and the right now, isn't that kind of depressing? when you put it in that kind of a perspective? When you realize that all you are is just a tiny little blip on a larger radar? What's the point? What's the value? Why do we do what we do? Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Which is why I want to skip to chapter 12 and go to verses 9 through 14. Chapter 12, verses 9 through 14. We have our introduction. Now we have our conclusion. After everything that has been discussed from the beginning point to the ending point, he says, being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books, there's no end. Of much study is the weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter, when all has been heard, is this: fear God, keep his commandments, because this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Does this part ring a little bit differently than the first part? I think it feels a little bit different. Kevin, you had your hand up a second ago. Well, I wanted to wait until after I'd finished my run, and then I would say. And Kevin had his hand up when we were still in chapter 1, so he has more than rights to go back to chapter 1 here.
I was just going to make the comment towards chapter 1, that first part. I think that most people, if they sit in the quietness of their room or their life, ask those same exact questions. And I think there's some comfort in the fact that this question has been posed, or these series of questions have been posed for a long time, we'll just put it that way. And there's some comfort in knowing that all of us are in the same position. I think this is what it helps put us in place for what we're talking about here at the end, is we're all in it together. We all have the same basic limitations, struggles that are in place, and then as we get to the end of the book, we have the same common goal and direction that's there. So we're all in it together under the sun.
Yeah, very good. I'm going to have you repeat that comment word for word a little bit later. Because what you said is perfect for the next passage that I'm going to throw in just a few minutes, that really ties, I think, some of this together. So try to remember what Kevin had said there. But as we go to the very end, what's different here?
It's optimistic.
All right, it's optimistic. Why? What's different?
Because it focuses on your relationship with God.
All right, because it focuses on a relationship with God. How is that different? How's that different from the beginning?
It's not toiling under the sun.
What? Okay, God wasn't in the picture. What did you say, Ryan? Was it you who said something a second ago?
It doesn't have to do with toiling under the sun and the repetitive cycles that can just seem monotonous.
Yeah, when we talk about the repetitive cycles here, where's God in this picture?
He's in control.
All right. is he part of this cyclical nature of creation?
He's outside of it.
Yeah. Is God under the sun? Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument, and I'm not trying to be, yes, God's fingerprint is all over everything that's under the sun, but God is not bound by the rules of the cyclical nature of his creation. He is outside of that. So when the Ecclesiastes writer talks about life under the sun, really what he's talking about is a life that is fully, completely wrapped up on what? Not God. The exact opposite, right? It's the focus of life without God being part of the picture. Because he's not in that under the sun picture. And if all that you have is life without God, without hope, without a relationship with the Creator who is above the creation, what meaning is there to your life? Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. That's the picture of life under the sun. A life that is separated, that is wholly, completely different from a life with God. Now, chapter 12 really begins with what? What's the call from the teacher in chapter 12? Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And then you kind of have this whole, almost comedic picture of metaphors that talk about people getting old, right? All of these things are things that happen with age. And you get to a certain point, and I don't know, I'm just speaking from what the author is saying here. So I'm not one way or the other. I'm just going to say, can you lose enjoyment of this life the older that you get? That happens, doesn't it? Have you ever been around an individual who was really, really old on their deathbed? And what they're saying is, I'm just ready to go home. You've been around those people? It's because this life doesn't hold the same pleasures, the same joys, the same things that it once held. They are incapable of enjoying those things any longer. Does that make sense? That's what he's saying. And if they spend the entirety of their life in a condition by which they're only focused from the sun down, where life is meaningless, and there is no joy, there is no enjoyment, there is no hope, there's none of that, when they get to the end of their life, they will be a torn up person compared to what they could have been. And he says, look, start early. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, when you're still able to enjoy life and understand that life that's lived under the sun doesn't have to be life under the sun. That we can look past the sun and we can find hope and we can find value and we can find purpose and we can find all that if we look beyond the sun and we focus on our Creator. And instead of staying trapped in the creation, we break that. Our life is given meaning. It's given purpose. We're given a reason for our existence. That in our day and in our time and in the moment that we had to make a difference in our lives, that's exactly what we did. We served God faithfully. We served God. We kept His commandments. That is the whole of our duty. We passed that on to the next generation to serve God. and to keep his commandments, who then pass that on to the next generation to fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty. And we live faithfully in our time. We have a purpose. We have a meaning that transcends just the same general vanity that he talks about here. So that even if at some point in time my great, 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 great grandchildren won't even know my name, which will be the case, right? How many of you guys know the names of your great, 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 great grandparents? Some of you, maybe? Yeah. Mine will have forgotten my name, I guarantee it. At this point, 4 generations down the road, they're not even going to know what my name was. And that's fine, because will I be forgotten? What does he say? What's the author say here at the end of chapter 12? Will I be forgotten? Hey, Joshua, let's let other people have a chance, okay? All right.
He's going to bring every deed into judgment.
All right. God will bring every deed into judgment, every secret thing, whether good or evil. In other words, will I be forgotten? No. Everything I do, every thought that I have, which should scare us to death on the one hand, right? But this is the reality. I'm not going to be completely, totally, completely forgotten. None of us will be forgotten. My great, 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 great grandchildren might not know who I am, but when I go to the Creator instead of the creation, I will be remembered for eternity. Questions or comments on this before we look at one more passage? And this is the one that goes back to what Kevin was saying just a second ago. I want to flip back to chapter 3, because in chapter 3, as I really think in chapters 1 and 2, Solomon, especially there in chapter 2, but it's there towards the end of chapter 1 into chapter 2. He says, I tried all of these things to seek out wisdom, what is wise. And he tried various things that the world might say, hey, let's try this. Nope, that didn't work. Well, let's try this. Let me find meaning and purpose in women. Let me find meaning and purpose in drugs. Let me find meaning and purpose in wealth. Let me find meaning and purpose in constructing great building projects for myself that are going to last beyond my life. Let me find meaning and purpose in all of these things. And every single time, he came up empty. And then in chapter 3, you really get into, I think, the heart of what's going on. But you get in verses 9 and following. Actually, I have 10 and 11 up here. But let's see. Verse 9, what gain does the worker have from his toil? I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive there's nothing better for them than to be joyful, to do good as long as they live, and also that everyone should eat, drink, take pleasure in all of his toil. This is God's gift to man. What is it that God has placed within us?
Eternity.
All right, eternity. Eternity in what way? Eternity in the earth remains forever eternity?
Heavenly.
Okay, well,
Spiritual.
I'm not sure it's a spiritual necessarily. I think it's pushing towards that end. But it's the ability to understand this, right? The ability to look at what's taking place here, seeing the cycles, the sun, the wind, the rivers, and the sea. How many of y'all have a pet, have had a pet, or whatever the case is? you know, how many of y'all have looked at your dog or cat and thought, wow, I bet they are pondering the meaninglessness of the universe in regards to the sun rising and setting, the wind blowing, and the seas? Yeah. Usually for me it was, I wonder what that stupid cat is thinking right now, you know. And usually it was probably, I think our cats had a pea brain, or a brain the size of a pea. They weren't very smart with. But dog, cat, whatever the case is, not all animals, not all creatures are able to think this way, right? This is something that God has gifted to man. We're able to step back. We're able to have existential crises. We're able to look and say, what is my meaning? What is my purpose? Why do I exist? Those are the kinds of questions that we are allowed to ask that so many other animals out there, or all of those animals in the animal kingdom that's out there, they don't ask those questions. They don't delve into deep philosophical discussions. Whatever Disney might want you to think, they don't talk to each other and have these kinds of conversations. It doesn't work. We have been gifted this ability to understand, to ask the questions, to dig into it. And what's the end result of that, hopefully? When you ask the question, you're looking for what? Yeah, to find answers. We're able to perceive beyond the sun. We're able to see that there's more than just the sun rising, the sun setting, and the sun rising again, but there is a creator beyond that who set this in motion. And I can make meaning of my life outside of just my existence. And even then, we have eternity in our hearts where we ask these questions and we seek out these answers. Even then, another gift that God has given right with that is our ability, and this goes back to what Joshua said earlier, to work, to labor, to go out and do something that in my day and in my time makes a difference in some small way, so that I receive from that. And what do I do with what I've received? What does he say? Eat and drink and enjoy it. This is a gift that God has given to us. There is a way of looking at life that's not just part of the rat race. It's not just the daily grind. It is seeing something beyond. We're given within us the ability to look beyond the sun and to find purpose, to find meaning, to find something that is greater than vanity. All right, questions or comments? Kevin, I couldn't remember exactly what you'd said a minute ago that I was like, that sounds, because you said stuff to this, but I couldn't remember what it was. Do you remember what you said? Did I? Okay. You want to remind us what you said?
I was just saying here in chapter 1 that these are, if someone's in their room by themselves, that they're contemplating their life and existence, these are things that everyone, I think, comes up with. These are all questions people have. And that puts us all on the same plane. We all have the same questions from way back to when this writing was done and before. It's common to all mankind. And then I think it ties into there in chapter 12 where we end up. We all end up together. We're all in it under the sun together under the same kind of circumstances, having the same questions, having the same eternity that you brought up here at our fingertips. We're all in it together.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. All right. Perfect. Anybody else have any comments or questions before we close this up and I turn things over to Richard? All right. Well, good class, guys. Thank you.